Next up, let's welcome Adam Plumpton, VP of Global Planning at Cisco, for a fireside chat on how Cisco is using Causal AI to identify the drivers of customer demand and take a proactive approach to demand planning. And this will be hosted by Jerry Stevens, causaLens' General Manager, and Retail and Consumer Goods Leads. So please remember to submit your questions via Slido, and welcome Jerry and Adam.
Thank you. I don't have any jokes. I'm not really good at that, so I'm not even going to try. Do you have a joke?
I do not.
Okay, very good. We'll just cut to the chase then. I guess the joke is on us. We're right before lunch, so that is the joke that we have. So the first thing is a matter of introduction. So as Danielle said, I'm the general manager for a few different verticals. My background is in CPG and retail primarily, Procter and others. But I ran software for IBM. In North America for a while, so I've been part of a big community, and then I jumped into the startup world, I don't know, about 8 years ago, and probably in that picture I had dark hair, and you can see what the startup community has done to me now. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I'm Adam. I lead the planning function within supply chain operations at Cisco. I'm about 25 years into my supply chain career. I have done that at tech companies like Cisco and HP, at tech/automotive companies, Tesla, and at an additive manufacturing company called Carbon 3D. So I've seen the supply chain problem from a couple of different angles and have had a bunch of different roles over that period of time.
Yeah. So I'm excited to ask Adam a couple of questions because he does go very deep, and frankly, Cisco goes very deep in the supply chain space. In fact, I think Gartner's identified Cisco as a leader in supply chain for the last number of years. So that's something to be very proud of. And I know Adam's a thought leader in the space too. So I assume a lot of questions will come kind of after the Q&A here. And then the other thing is demand planning in general. When I joined causaLens 2 years ago, I always thought that demand planning in general was a very, very good use case. And it is, because it sits in the middle of supply, obviously, and the creation of demand. And the way that I think about it is the pipeline, right? If you can get that right, then you build the pipeline from there. And Adam will speak a little bit to that as well as he kind of builds the future for Cisco. So thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And we try to think of a theme. So I think the theme that we thought about when we connected last week was it's a journey, right? So Adam can speak to his experience and the fact that it has been a journey. And he'll take you through that a little bit as we kind of go through the Q&A as well. Okay? So with that as a setup, Adam, a lot of people in the last 2 or 3 years, a little bit before, but certainly last 2 or 3 years, have talked about the idea of a resilient supply chain. Can you speak to how Cisco is approaching the idea and the building capability around the resilient supply chain and how Causal AI comes into that play?
Yeah, absolutely. And resiliency can mean a lot of different things in different contexts, right? And for us in supply chain, it typically means, are we able to produce and deliver the products that customers are ordering? And that resiliency is against some sort of disruption, whether that's a supply disruption, a demand disruption, whether that's driven by supplier solvency or a geopolitical issue or a labor issue, or you name it. And in trying to think about how you build insurance policies or practice to give yourself more resiliency, fundamentally, usually you're making trade-offs about investment versus risk, and some sort of perspective on demand is relevant. It always is. And so at the simplest level, it's about providing to each of those scenarios or questions a view on demand at the right granularity over the right time frame, and that's where my team is often pulled into the conversation. And we will talk more about how we're leveraging Causal to do that, because candidly, the organization, my counterparts who have your old job, Jerry, that time perspective is usually pretty short, and the resiliency horizon that we're talking about is usually quite long. And so, we're making decisions as a supply chain organization and building models and forecasts that are far, far longer than the business's current perspective. So that's relevant. And I think that the second piece that maybe is less obvious, or maybe it is obvious to this audience, is in our causal models and our forecast models, if we can more explicitly articulate our best perspective of future error ranges, we'll do far better than looking at what ranges were in a rearview mirror. So those are two areas that are important.
Yeah, and your supply chain is very complex.
It is.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about that?
So to give you a sense, and I think it's relevant. It's everyone's supply chain is complex, but ours, we sell about. If you go on Cisco.com, or if you're a partner, we sell about 40,000 unique items. That translates to about 10,000 different things. So we're the physical portion of the supply chain. We sell in 200 odd countries. We do it largely through both an internal and a partner-led sales force that are portfolio sellers. And so there's not a whole lot of direct feedback from the sales community on item 1 or item 5,000 or item 10,000, right? You're not getting that level of granularity. And I'd say in addition to that, the levers to influence demand and kind of shape demand are pretty low. Most of the buying decisions are not based on whether it's in shelf or whether it's 5% cheaper. It's about something more complicated and longer time horizon than that. So it's in some ways kind of more of an open loop forecasting system that we've got to satisfy 10,000 products with.
Yeah, I think it's an important point as we start to dig into causal AI, because a lot of people in the audience who may just be getting started with the idea of causality, and because I really believe that similar to what Judea Pearl was talking about, which is how we build out this kind of universe of causal applications is applications. It's things in production. It's models being used. It's value being delivered. And I think that is when we start to pull the train, if you will, the individuals who want to be part of this ecosystem. And in regard to that, let's talk a little bit about causality with regard to what the Cisco team is doing in causality specifically to the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 3 or 4 of my colleagues who actually do the work. I'm talking about the work. They do the work sitting in the audience. Fundamentally, there's a bunch of different things we've done. I'll kind of group them into 2 categories. One is building aggregate models by business group at a 1-year offset that are enabled by feeding our causal models with thousands of different features or sets of time series data. And in doing that, generating a causal forecast, again, at 1 year out relative to the data set that you're inputting for what that business looks like. Now, that doesn't directly enable the team to go buy the right mix of parts, but it surely helps us understand and get a different perspective on how volume could be shifting. And that's immensely valuable. Second thing we're doing is with the same sorts of time series, but with different models, and in some ways with connected models that are correlating, building mixed level forecasts at that unit level, really with 2 goals. One is for the long tail of those 10,000 parts, I would love to have the output of the causal model be the forecast and have it be a no-touch process. And that's not for the sake of eliminating the people in the process, it's for the sake of enabling the planners in the process to focus on the higher impact left side of that Pareto. Yeah. The second part is to give a causal stream into that left side of the Pareto so that in addition to all of the other inputs that those planners have, they've got a robust causal-based forecast stream that they can use to ensemble or in a consensus type process to ideally improve the output of that forecasting process.
Yeah, and you can run counterfactuals and learn and build better strategies moving forward.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I love that application. It's very exciting. Can you speak to maybe some of the challenges? So this is not an easy button.
Yeah.
We all know this. This is not, hey, we're all of a sudden causally driven and all of a sudden everything is explainable and transparent and we're ready to go. It is a journey.
Yeah.
Can you speak to maybe some of the challenges that you had to, or that the team maybe has overcome, or maybe is still overcoming to this day?
Yeah, there are a few. Most have come up throughout the course of the morning already, right? We're talking about a lot of data. So, staging, organizing, transforming, just kind of the operations of enabling this are not insignificant. It takes time. And it takes, some care and feeding and leaving alone to experiment and develop models and build confidence and test and expand. So that component is not trivial. And I think once then you start to catch the tiger by the tail a little bit and get people's interest, there's this pull and thirst. It doesn't change the fact that it still takes time. So prioritization and striking a balance between productizing and delivering something to the organization, which in our case is a repeatable exercise that has to happen every week or every month, in addition to continue to experiment and expand your scope, is a balance that we've got to manage well.
Yeah. And can you speak to maybe some of the benefits as well that you've seen as you've gone through the journey?
Yeah, the first is the obvious one on performance. And we did this, the team did this in an interesting moment in time. We were doing this during the course of COVID when our demand patterns were just completely out of whack from normal historical patterns. And they built models trained with pre-COVID data, and they were remarkably accurate in comparison to all of our other forecasting approaches. And so that was shocking, and that got people's attention.
Yeah.
The second thing that is then, and everyone has said this, and it's obvious, it's the why, right? And sometimes those whys they make sense, and you say, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense, and you can dive deeper. And sometimes they don't quite make sense, and that, I think, helps inform a dialogue that maybe improves the second version of the models and maybe causes the business to think about other things.
Yeah.
That process has been pretty rich.
Yeah, and we see that a lot as well with other clients as well. It is a journey depending on the use case. Yours is obviously very complex in terms of demand forecasting across the global enterprise, thousands of SKUs, multiple timeframes, multiple periods, multiple decision makers. You have suppliers, you have customers, you have vendors. It's very, very complex. So it is a journey. We see that all the time, but I do think it enables people, number one, to understand their data better, for sure. Where are we missing data, maybe? And then the other thing is really asking questions that you're not asking already, I think, comes to play as well. Did you experience that?
We did, and I'd say we did it both ways. Maybe one example is, not surprisingly, some macro factors were key causal drivers that we pulled out of these models, and that's not surprising. In the back and forth, it's like, well, you know what? The dynamics in this particular region are very different than that particular region, and that dialogue is kind of reframing the next couple of quarters probably. And rather than building global models, or in addition to building global models, we're going to build some geographic centered models. So that's an example. Maybe another is we have a business perspective that kind of the hangover of the bullwhip that was COVID, right? So from a tech perspective, demand spiked, lead times were extended, companies accumulated backlog, supply eventually got healthy. We shipped that supply to customers. That doesn't mean that a customer who just got 10,000 access points is able to go install them. Now there's this consumption issue where the mouse has to work its way through the snake.
Sure.
We didn't anticipate or model that in our causal models, but the dialogue prompted us to try to pick those types of effect up as features and build them into the model. So I think I can see examples kind of both directions.
Yeah. So what's next? You guys are, I think, at a pretty good point, production, et cetera. So what's next in terms of the causal work?
We've got plenty of room left to keep building out this as part of our forecasting practice. There's a lot there. I kind of joke that each quarter when we do a roadmap review, the font on the page gets smaller and smaller.
That's true. That's true.
It really is true. There's also a lot of adjacencies that are super relevant even within supply chain. We're focused on the demand problem. You could think about the inventory problem. You could think about, there's plenty of logistics, examples, pricing, for supplier commercial relationships. There's an endless set of possibilities.
Yeah.
So that the challenge is prioritization.
Well, that's why I like demand planning. There's upstream, and we think about it in terms of developing a pipeline, right? So once you're able to, it's somewhat modular, right? Think about it as a modular kind of environment where, hey, we've kind of demand planning, we have causal models that we're very happy with. There's pipelines that we can build on top of that that go to upstream and downstream impacts and effects and decision making. And that's the last question I have for you, is because ultimately the idea, the goal of what we're working on is to enable better decisions, right? And that's what we try to do. That's what you try to do. That requires trust, right? A great deal of trust. So how have you navigated that within the Cisco organization?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of that is time, candidly, right? To give yourself the time to, let me step back for a second. I think there's layers of that, right? There's the demand planner, so an individual contributor who's got their own perspectives, they've got a marketing input, they've got what happened yesterday, and they've got, 2 or 3 different machine learning streams, one of which is our causal stream. How do you get that person to understand what this is well enough so that they're picking it out and they're making a critical evaluation? So there's exposure, there's learning on the demand planner side. For the data science team, I think for us, it's been really, really important that that team understands the planning problem. So they're talking to their customers in a way that enables that learning and connection to happen more quickly. Yeah. With both that community and then as you roll it up the ladder, we do a quarterly readout to the CFO, and I include a slide or 2 on our causal perspective. And explainability, transparency, causal factors, the relevance of those causal factors, those are all important things. Yeah. And at the end of the day, model performance kind of matters too.
Yeah, well, yeah, it starts there, doesn't it? Certain level of accuracy is required to make decisions. Well, that's all I had. I do want to thank you and appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Absolutely.
And definitely want to open it up for any questions.
Perfect timing. So a couple of minutes just before lunch. First question, how do you implement consistency across multiple structural causal models that may exist for the hundreds of different products that you have?
I think that's both one of the challenges and maybe one of the I think we're thinking about it a couple of different ways. Let me take 2 different examples. One is we do run aggregate models by business at a dollar level, and those are, like I said, helpful in thinking about the size of the business and comparing against our unit plan that's generated other ways, bottoms up. It's helpful to think about volume trends, which is super hard. Additionally, we're building unit plans, right? So just driving correlation between those 2 is one approach. I mentioned the regional thing earlier. We're running things like there's a Puneet who leads the team has a cube, and we're running it kind of by business, by region, and there's a third dimension. I guess it's by layer in the stack, level of granularity. Those are going to end up with different answers. And candidly, we see richness in that. And so at some level, I think we're leaning into the fact that these different models aren't necessarily all going to be correlated, and the why is going to help us, dial each of them in to a better extent.
Yeah.
There are a few more questions, but I'm also conscious what time it is. So what I was going to suggest is those who have the questions, unfortunately, you've submitted them anonymously, please grab Adam or Jerry over lunch. But otherwise, I think we should say thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.